Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Venomous Fringe. Tonight's show, we're going to be drifting away from the typical Dogman discussion topics, and we're going to talk a little bit different from cryptids to paranormal. Tonight's guest is Abnormal Truth. You may recognize him from his various discussion videos and Mandela videos on his own YouTube. Abnormal, welcome to the Venomous Fringe.
What's going on, Chris? How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Just have the day off and glad to be talking to you.
Absolutely. It feels great to have a day off, isn't it?
It's always good.
With that being said, tonight we're going to be talking a little bit of both between cryptids and paranormal discussion. So I want to ask you this. In the sense of where it all started for you, where did it all begin with the fascination with the cryptids and the paranormal? Like, where did it all begin? Feel free to talk about one or the other. Take your time in between.
All right. I think it all began with a UFO book I picked up at my first book fair. I'm in my mid 40s, and ever since then, I've just always have had a interest in anything that's strange that isn't supposed to happen. I think after that, I was reading about the pyramids in Egypt when I was like 10 years old. I even studied the occult, not to want to be in it. I just wanted to know what they believed or, what all that was about. I've also looked into most of the religions around the world to see what they believed in. Bigfoot, just anything. I've That's pretty much my life's work, and my big interest in my whole life has been. And to me, the term paranormal has kind of been taken over by the ghost subject. But to me, paranormal should encompass everything that's strange. But yeah, I've ghost dreams, anything like that. I've always been interested in, and I've just have never stopped doing that.
I think it's interesting that you mention how it all started for you when you picked up a book on UFOs, because I remember when I was at a small book fair myself and I had picked up a small book on Sasquatch, and that's kind of where I started with cryptid discussion. So I guess it works both ways.
Yeah, I mean, well, you just knew that was interesting even when you were little. You just knew that you wanted to know more about what is that all about.
100% agree. And the interesting thing, too, when we look at cryptids and paranormal, and this is what I wanted to ask you as well, is do you believe that there is a connection? It might be too early of a question, but do you believe that there is a connection, dividend, between the cryptids and paranormal?
Yes, I'm kind of taking the biblical view on a lot of things now. And well, actually, I want to say that I think a straight up cryptid to me, and I guess this is all about terminology, but I think a straight up cryptid would be about a natural creature that is not filed with our scientists. You know what I mean? Like an actual normal thing that we're just not used to. Maybe they're hidden. Maybe there isn't a lot of them. Or you know what I mean? So I also know for a fact that there are supernatural beings out there that people see. So to me, there's evidence that there are separate. So every cryptid is not supernatural. You know what I mean? Uh, and so, but you also definitely have lots of people seeing supernatural entities out there.
I do agree with that. And the reason why I specify on that is because when we spoke prior, we talked about how we look at cryptids. There are some supernatural abilities involving, for example, talking Dogman. We spoke of the whole supernatural aspect of them and what they could possibly be. And that makes me wonder, have you heard of any mysterious supernatural like creatures such as like the rake, for example?
Yes, I actually know very little about the rake, but I have heard of them, and I almost asked you about that on the interview we did on my channel, Abnormal Truth. And so the rake, I'm not very well versed on, but I have heard of it. But that's something I know kind of little about.
Uh,
Real quick, the only reason why I know about the rake is from looking into the dogmen. So that comes up every once in a while.
that's another reason why I also wanted to ask that was because I was looking up, and how I found out about this creature was through the creepypasta forums, which is an old fictitious tale of what possible true intrusions of animals and supernatural are, and that's kind of where I had started to get into it. But I know with the rake being such a powerful, phenomenal creature, supernatural wise, I figured that would be one question I wanted to throw at you. But with that being said, though, besides the rake, when it comes to your research with cryptids or what you know about cryptids, what is the number one thing you try to look out for in the cryptid community as a whole when you look up certain topics like Sasquatch or Dogman?
I'm usually trying to figure out the origins of what these things really are, maybe where they come from. I'm interested in hearing as many as possible eyewitness encounters with them to try to ascertain some kind of knowledge about them, what they're doing, where they come from.
Do you believe that there is an agenda or a cover up on a majority of these cryptids?
I do. I believe the government knows a lot more about everything than they're telling us, and I believe the government has decades. They're ahead of us decades in pretty much everything. They keep a lot of things to themselves, and especially in the technology realm, they're decades ahead of us in the military equipment they have. And I really do believe they suppress a lot. It seems as though they want to keep us in the material world as much as possible and doubting anything spiritual or supernatural. Now, it's kind of changing now in the last decade or so. You're seeing a lot more shows about ghosts and things like that, which makes me wonder what the agenda is there. But I believe the government, all the governments, are hiding a lot.
I strongly agree with that as well. I just think that there is a lot that is being hidden from the public domain versus what we need to know, because I feel that there is a bit of a life and death situation here when it comes to being misinformed and the faults that it could lead to if you're not informed on certain things.
If you keep your head buried in the sand, it's not going to do you any good. You've got to know what you're up against, and I think it's almost evil to keep those kind of things from the general population. And it makes you wonder what their reasons are.
Oh, I agree. Have you ever had an encounter with a cryptid, or may have known someone that you know have had an encounter with one?
I have never had a cryptid encounter, and by cryptid I mean a non supernatural entity. Something flesh and blood. But I have known a few people that have seen Mothman kind of entities, and my ex-wife was once in a trailer somewhere in Virginia in the mountains before I knew her, and she said that she was alone in her trailer, and something kept going around banging on the house, and she heard heavy footsteps and rapping on the windows, and she never could see anything. And she never did find out what that was, but to me that sounds real Sasquatch sounding to me. You know, almost like I don't know what she was doing or why a Bigfoot would do that. I've just heard that they do that type of thing, and that's the only thing that because I ask everybody I know really well, hey, have you had anything weird happen to you? And that was the one thing she came up with. So um, I was working in the Nashville airport about 10 years ago, and I was asking this guy, and this is going to be a short story. It wasn't too traumatic or anything, but him and two other friends saw. I don't want to say a Mothman, but the thing was a black creature with wings on top of a house. And that was about all there was to it. It didn't chase after them or anything like that. But um, that's the only couple that come to mind that I personally have known. And the creature didn't seem supernatural. It was there. You couldn't see through it. Didn't have glowing eyes or anything, but it was like a humanoid kind of creature that was a little bat-like. So the closest thing I could correlate it to was Mothman. So
That's something very interesting, but also in a sense could be linked. I mean, the first one with the ex-wife, it sounded more Sasquatch,
yeah,
and like you had mentioned too, because I personally, in a case where you hear banging or knocking like that, I don't think the Mothman would be a creature that would want to simply do that. I feel it would endeavor a supernatural connection in a sense with it being with the red eyes. You hear the cases of them being people feeling almost attracted to the hypnotic red eyes in a sense, almost like they are hypnotic. That's why I call them that. But then you also have the case where you had mentioned when you were in the airport and you had these guys talking about what they had seen would be the Mothman. You know, there's another case where you see something almost prestige as that, as very non cryptid sense, because that's another thing too, which is why I feel Mothman is more symmetrical in a way with paranormal. Do you believe with cases like with the Mothman? Do you think that this is a supernatural creature or an omen?
I really do believe that to be a supernatural creature, especially if you look at the original case. Um, but from their description, they just didn't have a lot of supernatural things. They actually ran away, I believe, if I remember correctly. So they never saw it fly off or anything. But to me, the Mothman would be a principality or a fallen angel or something of that sort. Because, like you said, it was kind of like an omen, and who knows if the Mothman created that disaster or what, but it just has that feel of being a supernatural. I don't, and the Mothman isn't seen a lot either. You know,
That's very true. And one of the other reasons why I bring up the whole concept of it being possibly an omen is the fact that you mentioned disasters. We see this thing in areas, and when there's a disaster, prior to a disaster, do you feel that this creature is indents? It's opened as a creature based upon disaster, and that it's here to warn us of upcoming natural and possible global disaster.
I don't really know because I don't recall any other instances of a Mothman appearing before some sort of disaster. Do you know of another one?
Well, while there isn't enough evidence to provide on the table, I mean, besides the infamous Silver Bridge collapse, there was reports in by I butcher it so terribly, but the city of which Chernobyl was, where Chernobyl was located in Russia, there was this case for before the great nuclear disaster that some of the workers were seeing this creature flying around the area, and it was dubbed the Blackbird of Chernobyl. The Blackbird of Chernobyl also had this glowing red eyes, which were very equivalent to the Mothman and whatnot. And it was reported to be seen in a couple days in between before the great nuclear disaster, as well as also people were receiving mysterious phone calls, and no one knew what these were about. There was also a reported photograph online saying that the Mothman was seen seen on 9/11, and that it was seen before the great Fukushima nuclear reactor reaction back in 2011. There's a lot of possible sightings of this thing being seen before a natural disaster, but I also have some problems with that as well. And I'm not going to adjacent to me too much because I'm just going to just simply say that I feel that without the evidence on the table, it's hard to say for sure.
Well, we can always theorize because, sometimes that's all you have. And I had not heard that about Chernobyl or 9/11. So to me, um, those entities were either causing the disaster or feeding off of it. Maybe they were warning. Uh, that's real hard to say, but I think the Mothman is really mysterious. I think he's a really mysterious character. Or he it's there's no telling what was actually going on there because in some sense it did seem like he was trying to warn and he might not even been warning. Maybe he just shows up as an omen of something bad coming. I know if I saw a Mothman in my yard, I would be worried.
I will be as well. I would be a little terrified to see something like that. And plus, I mean, a lot of people got to remember too, as researchers and show hosts, is that we're still normal people. We see something like that, we're going to react very, very abnormally freaked out by it.
Hmm.
Do you believe, in a sense, besides the Mothman, that other cryptids possess supernatural and paranormal like activity, so to speak? Now, surely you wouldn't classify it as a cryptid in that sense. You'd classify it as something totally different if that was the case. For example, if you would, when we mentioned Dogman prior on the other shows, um, we talked about how there could be 1 to 3 different types. Do you believe in cases like with Sasquatch and even Dogman, or even creatures such as Loch Ness, or maybe even the unknown real big cryptids like the Ohio Grassman or Jumpin' Jack, or and in general, do you feel that some cryptids possess supernatural to paranormal like attributes?
Yes, and Jumpin' Jack is a very interesting topic. I really love that topic. Um, and it's definitely I think some of them when I hear an encounter from an eyewitness that says a cryptid telepathically communicated or sent out a supernatural intense fear to the subject, to me that is not a normal animal that that's to me that's something animals don't possess naturally. So to me that's a huge clue that whatever that was had something going on in the supernatural. And so if you're getting telepathic, and I've heard of a lot of kids having telepathic communications with either a Sasquatch or a dog man looking through their window. So to me, that's evidence of supernatural activity for sure, because I just don't really believe that any regular animals would have that capability. And the same way goes with their eyes glowing. And I think we mentioned that on the interview I did with you, that there's a big difference between eye shine, which you can totally explain as just normal reaction from their eyes, refraction and stuff, as opposed to a creature with glowing eyes. That's I don't think would happen with most animals. So I and like I said, I do think there are your cryptids and you have your supernatural entities that show up. And I think if you really listen to the clues, you may be able to discern whether it was a supernatural encounter or something with just a flesh and blood creature that we don't know about.
I agree with that as well, and that's the reason why, even on my show, I very strongly lean towards two different creatures in a sense on when we talk supernatural and flesh and blood, and that's just not just Dogman. That's also just for every other cryptid too. Now, do you believe that cryptids can possess when you think of it like this. When we hear eye shine, for example, like you could tell a difference, like you mentioned, between illuminated eye shine and regular glowing eye shine, which is clearly something, or glowing eyes, so to speak. Do you feel that, is there a specific blend of, like, when you hear of a red eye shine or red glowing eyes, would you sense that to be that of a demonic creature?
Yeah, I would. Now, of course, you have regular animals out in the woods that their eyes will shine like that. But if they're internally freaking glowing, right? Like internally, the light source is coming from within the eye. That's a big clue that you're dealing with something. Oh, and I wouldn't say demonic because demons, and I think a lot of people miss this. And if you're looking at it through a biblical lens, demons do not have a body. To me, they are the souls of the Nephilim. So and which were most of the time giants. And giants are another whole subject that I'm really interested in. But the Nephilim were giants. The fallen angels came down, mated with the women. Their offspring were supernatural, like they were um, demigods. They had some supernatural powers, but yes, yet they were out flesh and blood. So I think there is a distinction there. What was the question again? Sometimes I start thinking about 10,000 other things as I'm explaining something.
It's totally okay. I'm the same way. The question was simply, do you believe that with the red eye shine that you see from animals such as a Sasquatch or a Dogman, do you believe that it's when it's red and it glows, do you believe that that's a demon, or do you believe that's just a responsive eye shine, almost equivalent to that of your normal animal in the forest?
Right. I was just trying to clarify, to me, demons do not have a body, but fallen angels and their offspring can either appear in any shape they want or are have supernatural. So to me, a demon is something that needs to possess someone to be in a body. They were not meant to be. God did not design them to be on this earth. Therefore, they have to roam the earth and never go to heaven because they weren't designed to go to heaven. They were never meant to be. So to me, demonic activity um, is basically kind of like a lot of people would say paranormal activity, ghosts, and that kind of activity, things moving across the room, that kind of thing. But as far as the eye shine goes, if they're having glowing eyes, I just that is a big tip off that is not a normal creature.
I agree with that as well. I've always thought that too. Now, when you mention Nephilim, do you believe that these dogmen that are being cited are maybe not even flesh and blood animals themselves as a whole, or do you believe that these are all Nephilim creatures or separate? I know we mentioned 1 to 3 different types, and I know I kind of sat in I kind of crucified the belief of what I was talking about on your other show, but do you feel that these creatures could be related as ports of Nephilim, as we've been theorized before in the past?
I believe that I'm keeping that possibility in mind, but to tell you the truth, I don't know. But if you wanted to speculate and theorize about it, that uh, they could be some sort of genetic manipulation that went on in ancient times from when the fallen came down. Uh, but I can't really put that together. I am not sure because I would like to say yes, all of these things are supernatural beings. Because to me, if you were a fallen angel and you could shapeshift, a dog man or a Bigfoot would be the perfect thing to go into to wreak havoc and survive and move around and do anything you wanted to. You know what I mean? But we're, I also don't believe a fallen angel would be digging through the garbage cans. You also cannot kill a fallen angel. You would not be able to kill a fallen angel with any kind of firearm for sure. And I've heard too many dogman cases where the dogman was reported to be killed. There's not a whole lot of them, but so to me, right now, with all the and I'm my theories are already changing. If I find some evidence, that looks otherwise, I'll change it. But right now, it almost seems like we have some natural dogmen, cryptids, and we have some supernatural entities that may either be related or they're imitating them. Because, like I said, fallen angels can take the shape of whatever they want. I believe UFOs flying up in the sky, they may be regular good angels of the Lord, or they could be fallen angels. But and this is coming from somebody who was hardcore UFO alien for most of his life. Like there was no doubt that these were aliens. I really believe now that aliens are fallen angels. And this is coming from somebody that's been abducted. And if you asked me that 5, 6 years ago, I would say no, angels aren't, or aliens aren't fallen angels. But to me, there's so many correlations that that has to be what's going on. I don't believe we have angels. Aliens coming down, and there's fallen angels. There's just too many things going on there. I think it's simpler than that, and I really believe that what's going on here is we're seeing some of the spirit world. And I believe you see those UFOs morphing and some of these more modern UFO videos. And I used to think, well, what kind of technology is that where they're just sitting there morphing in the air? And I believe those are angels up there. And they don't necessarily have to be fallen angels, but I believe the fallen angels are abducting people because these aren't demons. Demons can't manifest in the flesh. Okay. Fallen angels can, because it says in the Bible that you may be talking to an angel and you may be entertaining an angel and not even aware of it. And I also believe they can turn into pretty much whatever they want. That's just they have a spirit body, and so yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Oh, that's a good testimony too, because I know that you're not alone in that argument. There's a lot of people I've spoken to who've had close to the same theory, whether abducted or not. That leads me to another question before we touch base on paranormal mostly. Do you believe that most cryptids, from squatches to dogmen to grassmen, do you believe that these creatures could be summoned from UFOs? Could they be descendants of these aliens? These aliens bring them down to Earth for any specific purpose to roam the land or to collect intel? I know it kind of sounds like a complex question, but do you think that there is a strong connection with the UFOs dropping off cryptids to the planet for a resource?
That is a complicated question, but complicated questions are often good questions. And I remember the first time I've heard, and this was like 20 years ago, of a Bigfoot being sighted along with a UFO. I was like, what? Because my old school thinking was Bigfoot was a creature that lives in the woods. He hides really well, you know. But to me, that UFO is either a vehicle that a fallen angel is, read Ezekiel. The UFOs are in the Bible also, which will give you a big clue. And so that's why I'm tending to lean towards some of Dogman, Bigfoot has something to do with it. Maybe they're the offspring of the fallen. Maybe they were created by the fallen. Uh, but that's a telltale evidence there. If you have a Bigfoot on the ground and a UFO being sighted nearby, they're coming from all the same place or they're related.
That's a very interesting way of putting it too, and I've personally felt that way when it's come to various demons, not demons, but various cryptids coming forth and possibly here for whatever purpose may be. When we look at UFOs and paranormal, how close of a connection is there between the two?
Are you talking about UFOs and ghosts?
UFOs and ghosts, a little bit of the electronic magnetic energy that's summoned in between. Like, do you feel like there's a strong connection between the two, or is there like are they two separate things as a whole?
What's interesting is in a lot of abduction cases, there is paranormal activity along with it. So you may have things floating around the room, shadows going by, all that happening. Also, from the same person getting abducted. So, um, yeah, I think it's all related to that. Actually, I think it's all. I think those are all evil entities, either taking people or messing with people, or um, is it people being possessed, but not in um, the way that they're possessed and they're foaming at the mouth and their head spinning around. But I believe demons enter people all the time. And if you have enough, you'll have demonic energy around you. I don't really believe in ghosts. The Bible says that we all kind of go to sleep until Jesus comes back. And this won't be a real popular opinion to especially a lot of paranormal researchers. But I think every single one of them are demons that are haunting houses and haunting people. To me, from the research I've done, that is all demonic activity.
That's it's interesting because I've spoken to one guy who I'm actually close to and know personally, who's said close to the same thing, but he's also mentioned too about in the religious aspect of things that everything comes to adjourn with the end of days when UFOs and whatnot would possibly be one of the reasons why humanity would be wiped out, which to me sounds too far fetched, closest to the films of Independence Day and whatnot and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But when you look at that type of theory, when it's dividend to how we, in each religion, how it's been seen, to me, it's a very scary book to open up because it's like you talk about it. It's like, could you possibly summon a demon? Could you?
Well, I have to say this while I have the chance. There's a very real possibility that one day we will see so-called UFOs coming down. When he, do you believe that there's a new world order going to happen? That they're trying to make one government? You ever get
I've
into that?
I've actually wanted to ask you about that. Like, what?
Well, I see it. It's happening. That's what they're trying to do. I could talk for hours about that, so I kind of have to limit that. But when you put together ancient aliens being pushed so heavily, and movies like Independence Day, and every other movie is about space or aliens or something, or either that or magic. Um, it's it's like I just want to say that if you guys ever see UFOs come down, it's all over the news. It'll be the biggest news ever. I'm trying to tell everybody that those are fallen angels or something the fallen have made. I believe aliens are fallen angels, and that could be the great deception. I'm not saying that's what it's going to be, but when you look at ancient aliens, how they're pushing really the thought that aliens were the one that made us, that could be how the end times kind of comes around, because basically in the end times in the Bible, you'll see that the Antichrist makes a one world government, and it's real hard to get the world into one government. There's a few things they have to do, such as make a one world religion. And right now, you have the Pope talking to, Islamic leaders. You know what I mean? I could just see all this stuff really ramping up. And if you had asked me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have said, no, that's all crazy. But to me, it's gotten so in your face and evident. It just seems like that's what's going on. And I would just like to take this chance to tell everybody, don't necessarily believe that those are aliens that are coming down. If that's how it comes down, I'm just saying there's a lot of seems like if you look at what's being pushed to the mainstream now, because you know what, 10, 15 years ago, you didn't see that much about aliens on TV. That was they did the news networks didn't like to talk about it. If they did, they snickered about it. Say if there was a sighting of a UFO in a small town and thousands of people saw it, they would maybe put it on the news, but they would laugh about it. And there certainly wasn't shows like Ancient Aliens on there. It just seems like that's a big possibility. And as wild as it sounds, that could be the great deception, that aliens will come down, and basically, one of them will be the Antichrist. So there's something like that may happen because, I'm telling you, I know that these so-called aliens are fallen angels. They had ships that they traveled around in the Bible. There's just too many correlations in that, and I just think that's a huge possibility, and it's funny how they're kind of now, after being silent and the media shunning the idea, now you just started, and there's always been since the 50s and 60s and stuff. There's always been space movies and movies about aliens, Star Trek, this and that. And now, really, when you look at Ancient Aliens, that's what they're pushing. That the aliens may have made us. They're our creators instead of God.
Yeah, that's another thing. A lot of people whom, in that aspect of not just religion but also research, have also questioned as well when it comes to the true creator. What are they? Aliens, or is it God itself? And it's a very controversial topic.
I struggled with that I thought about that for a long time. Are these aliens really, fallen angels or what? And I was trying to think of some examples. Um, eh, you know, there's a lot of sexual encounters also, and it just doesn't seem to me that an intelligent alien race from however many light years away have come down to probe us and have sex with us. But on the other hand, fallen angels, as it says in the Bible, they mated with our women. It's if I don't want to go into it, but it's almost like the whole Bible thing was about Satan corrupting our flesh, and that's why the flood happened. It wasn't because we were bad because we had cities where the fallen angels. I think we had a lot more tech back then. That's why you see the pyramids and Cusco and Machu Picchu and all these structures that we can't really build now, but yet we're supposed to believe that ancient man did it with some copper tools. I think it follows along.
That's a good inception of it, because I know that for that conversation, what it's for what it's worth and for what it's been discussed with, it's a hard topic to really address, because so many people don't. I feel that when you get deep into discussions like this, people don't want to hear it because it's too far fetched, and it's also very frightening. And I feel that when people discuss topics like that, it freaks people out, because there's no anything could be taken for granted. But surely when we look at creationism and theory on how things and how we as a society were evolved, it's a truly frightening case. So, do you feel that when you hear cases with abduction, for example, because you also have a case of abduction involving yourself, do you feel that people are different after those cases? Do you feel that, like, could this possibly, with a possible creator or what to be a creator or an encounter with an alien, do you feel that it's a very frightening experience on its own sense?
Well, I think I have two things to address on that. During the time where I was taken a few times, and it was at the time I was most into aliens. I was in chat groups. I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of other abductees. I know all the lore. I know all the things that aliens have talked to people and told people, and others, all those backstories. And to me, they are. I kind of lost my train of thought again because, like I said, I'm thinking about 10,000 things. What was the question? One more time.
Do you feel that when people have encounters with aliens and abductions, do you feel it's a very traumatic but yet frightening experience for the person because they are dealing with someone or something that is abnormal to what you would see in regular day society?
Right. So I had never been further away from God during those times. I had never been more. I didn't get too new agey, but I was meditating and lucid dreaming and astral traveling, and I had never been further away from God, especially at the point where I realized something was actually coming in and taking me. And the other point I wanted to make was you mentioned something about fear. I'll tell you my one of my abduction stories there, encounters, whatever you want to call it. But there was an intense fear. I couldn't see anything in the room with me, but I knew it was there, and the fear got. I mean, I was so scared, and it's really scary if you think there's something in the room with you that you can't see. How are you going to fight or run away from that? And what actually happened to me, I just basically passed out. Somehow they can make you just pass out, and they can paralyze you. But I feel like there's a correlation between that and like some of the dogman encounters of the intense fear. Yes, the thing looks ferocious, but the fear these people are feeling is almost supernatural in its own. It's they're projecting fear on top of the visual. And so I believe all these things are coming from the same source, and they're from the fallen is the way I see it.
I strongly agree with that. I feel for something such as that, it would be a very life changing experience. And you mentioned how they have this ability that they could, like, put you to sleep and knock you out. Now that sparks a lot of curiosity right there for me, because that makes me wonder that these things are far from a natural entity or something in general that be flesh and blood. Because if something like that has the ability to put you to sleep without any substance or in general yourself physical mental health, that to me spells something totally abnormal, which makes me wonder, do you believe that with aliens and whatnot, that they have other control to things that into our life cycle versus how we can control it? In other words, I've always heard the theory about them messing with time. Do you have any theory, or if you know anything about it with theory and time, on how they can manipulate clocks and whatnot?
I and the missing time that happens with a lot of abductions. I don't know how that works. These to me are spiritual beings that are way older than us, and they have a lot of different abilities that we can't even fathom. And it seems like they can take you and pretty much put you back where you were nowadays. But what's interesting is when you look back to like the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, people would be missing for like, and they, Travis, was it Travis Walton? He was gone for like 5 days. But you would have the missing time. It would be like an hour or two usually. And so for some reason now it seems like, you're talking 30 minutes or so. So I don't know what's changed there. Um, but they obviously, and I don't believe I've ever had missing time. Um, but I have been paralyzed, and I have also had marks on my body after having those experiences. And that's what let me know something was really going on, because before then I would say, well, that was kind of weird, you know? But when you wake up with a mark on your body that would have hurt if it happened during the day sometime, I would have known these things were happening. And what's weirder, you can go up and look at other people's pictures on the internet of the exact same marks. So something physical is also happening.
Right, I've heard that case too, where there've been people who've had these encounters with a abnormal or unnatural entity, such as an alien, and have come back with marks, and they've taken photographs of what they've looked like, and it's just brutally traumatic in a sense. Which, before we wrap up on the UFO aspect of things, do you feel that with these creatures that there will be some sort of hidden science breakthrough within the next years, coming years, or do you feel that there is an immense amount of government interference that will never get the answers we need to aliens?
I don't know. It seems like they're getting close to quote unquote disclosure. And I'm very weary of people like Corey Good that's coming out with his, like, breakaway civilization kind of whole story. It's like they're using him to leak all that out slowly. And even all the old alien movies, that was all getting everybody used to the idea. So I do kind of think that they may be getting, and maybe it'll include Antarctica. Maybe they'll say, "Hey, we found this ancient civilization in Antarctica, and they weren't human." I do feel like that, but I also feel like that would be a deception because it was all fallen angel related and not beings from other planets. So I do believe that it looks like it's ramping up for some kind of disclosure. And they do that in increments, real slowly.
Do you feel that when you hear cases of the Men in Black, do you believe that those are aliens in disguise, or do you believe that those are actual human beings who've been somewhat, quote unquote, using the word brainwashed to be one of them as a cover in society?
The Men in Black are fascinating, and I've read as much as I can about them. And I'm the type of person, though, that if I don't know, I'm just going to say I don't know. I don't know what those things are. I don't know if they're government agents acting like, and I know certainly some of them have used that factor to where they've made themselves look strange. But also, there's those that really seem like they were weird, and definitely looked weird. Um, I don't know where to put the Men in Black, and I've never have, and I've tried to figure that out. And like I said, I've looked into that a lot. And then I hate the fact that they made those Men in Black movies to make it kind of like a joke. If they make a movie, a science fiction movie about something, they can really make people think that that's just a joke. Um, but I don't know. I can't even say that those would be fallen angels doing that. You know what I mean? I don't know what's going on there. I really don't.
Have you heard the case of Injured Cold?
No.
Well, Injured Cold was reported to be, he was known as the Grinning Man, and it was a possible MIB of a guy, and he was around the West Virginia area around the time of the Mothman sightings, and he had spoken, not really talkative, he didn't even talk at all from the reports were believed to be, but Injured Cold was apparently, supposedly, an alien in disguise, and he was basically there, like I mentioned, during the time of the Mothman phenomenon, but it was a very unknown period of time because you'd have MIBs coming into areas where there was a lot of hot spots, and they weren't doing things that normal humans would do, such as there was this one case I read in John Keel's Mothman Prophecies book, not to deviate from the facts of the cryptid in discussion, but he it was a story about a guy that was so like curious about what he ordered as food that he stared at it for a brief period of time, and the waitress arrived and said, "Do you need help with it?" And he was fascinated by how she was cutting the steak for this guy. And
Yeah,
what
they seem to not even know the basic things like how to eat, right? I'm not familiar with that case, so I'm thinking, what were the motives? Because, like you said, um, it seemed like the men in black were going around talking to people and telling them not to speak out about it. So I would have to kind of get a sense of the motives for what was going on there, and since I don't know that story, I can't give any insight because I don't know what the motives would be. My thoughts are maybe the fallen angels didn't want everybody talking. They were hiding more back then, and maybe it was fallen angels coming down. But I don't know why they wouldn't just look human because they have the possibility to look perfectly human. So again, that Men in Black thing, I cannot figure out. And I'm not going to sit here and I will theorize about things, but man, I it just blows my mind. I don't know what's going on there with the Men in Black, but I do find it really fascinating.
It is a very interesting topic, and of course, I can always throw you some things in the near future with it. But let's aim a little bit towards the paranormal. And with paranormal, it can go both ways because paranormal is probably, out of all of them, the most prominent in convincing a lot of people. Have you ever had, besides the abductions and whatnot, have you ever had an encounter with a demon or a spirit or something close to it, like a, even if it goes as far as fetch as a ghost?
All right, all right. So that was early, and maybe started 1999. But there's a program called what was that called? Pal Talk, and I was actually a moderator in this group for about 3 years, where it was like a abductee UFO chat room where you could voice chat. And the guy that started that, I won't mention his name, I got to know him really well after a few years of talking to him almost every day on there. And the people would come in and tell us their abduction stories or UFO sightings. And I mean, I was deep into that for several years. And I started dating his daughter, and they lived in New Orleans. Okay. And eventually I went to go visit him. A friend of mine, uh, and him and I went to New Orleans, started hanging out with him. And it was because it was like a 6 hour drive or something from Houston. And I started dating his daughter, and this family was really into UFOs. Every member of their family uh, had seen UFOs, the works. They had UFO videos and everything. But what I want to do here is tie in the supernatural or the paranormal aspect that goes along with some UFO alien cases. Anyway, I started dating his daughter, and what happened? She actually moved in with me in Houston. And before that, I would be at her father's house, and he had this table set up where you could play like network games. There's like five computers hooked up, networked, and we were playing like Civilization. Well, I would be sitting down in their home, and it really felt like something was just standing behind me. You know how you can feel that, even if you don't see them, you'll just know. It's almost like if somebody's looking at you in a crowded room, and you'll just feel it and look over and be like, "Hey, somebody's looking at me." That was the first kind of little hint. But when she moved in with me, uh, we would hear like feet dragging across the carpet. We would hear knocking on the inside of walls. I would see uh, shadow beings. Um, and one of the more interesting things is and we were talking about sleep paralysis earlier. And I've never heard this from anybody else. We had double sleep paralysis, which means both her and I had sleep paralysis. And lots of strange things were happening when she was living with me. Uh, but I remember one time she was I know something weird happened in this dream. It was like a what I thought was an alien back then, which I would now think was either a demon or a probably a demon, because demons can mess with your dreams too, or some sort of or a fallen angel. It was almost like asking me if I wanted to sell out my soul, and he was speaking to my spirit, and I said absolutely not, for a little bit of money and this and that, no. And she woke me up, and she was calling my name out in a mumbled way because she was having sleep paralysis. But she was able to, say my name loud enough and often enough where I did wake up. And this was right after having that weird quote unquote dream of, do you want to sell out and this and that. And I had sleep paralysis too. So she's sitting there, she can't move, and she's saying my name, and it wasn't abnormal, but she was like, abnormal, because it's hard to talk when you're paralyzed like that. You basically move your eyes sometimes, and that's it. So we both had sleep paralysis, and I've had sleep paralysis quite a few times, and a couple of times that's how I knew I was getting abducted. So to me, evidently, these fallen angels can, or maybe even the demons, can paralyze humans like that. And the Lord knows what they do to us. But like I said, I think a lot of it's genetically corrupting the human race so they can't be saved, is the bottom line. But I've had, I think the most paranormal activity was what I just told you. The time she was living with me, there were lots of things going on, especially the shadow beings. It was really, and you got to think, were we really having all these spiritual entities messing with us and aliens at the same time, or were they all the same thing?
That's a very in depth and very mysterious encounter you had with that situation with sleep paralysis and the facts that both of you were under that. And to me, that definitely does spark out a huge rush in when it comes to paranormal and just the sake being of that connection of just how frightening that could be. Do you believe now when that following this, because of how many years ago it was, do you feel that if you had the opportunity, would you return back to this place and have a paranormal investigation of it to get a better idea if there could pick up on any activity? Or if you want to answer the question like this, had you at the time had the opportunity, would you have set up an entire EVP system and get a reading of the entire house, or even have someone like a spiritual advisor come in and do a brief run-in of the house itself?
All right. Back then, I would have had a totally different mindset. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have done it, because I don't want any part of what I thought were aliens what I now know of as fallen ones, um, with possibly demons helping them. Like I said, demons don't actually have a body. They may manifest in your dreams and things like that. I wouldn't do it at all because, like I said, I was never further away from God. I was thinking more about aliens may have made us. That's why I think Ancient Aliens that show is so blasphemous because it's saying no, God didn't make you. There's no creator. It was just aliens. That genetically manipulate us. And in the interesting thing is a lot of abductions are centered around collecting sperm and women's ovaries and things like that. When you really look into it and you look into the Nephilim, that's what's going on. The devil was trying to corrupt the whole race. And think about it, that's why the flood happened. Noah and his family were the basically the only ones that were untouched by that. And God had a plan for us. And if we were all mixed in genetically, none of us would be saved because we weren't human anymore. There wouldn't be any humans left. And because I remember I used to think, well, yeah, the humans were just sinning all over the place. That's kind of like the surface story of why God did the flood. But if you really look into the Bible, it was more about genetic corruption. And then you have all of these aliens doing genetic experiments, and there's just so many tie-ins. I've been abducted before, and I felt myself floating down into the bed, and they were laughing at me telepathically. I'm pretty sure were laughing at me. What kind of aliens would be laughing? That sounds way more demonic. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. But I think the question was, would I do that again, or would I have like a paranormal team come in? Um, I just wouldn't do it again.
I agree with that. It sounds like from what you had experienced, for me personally, I would never want to run in with that. But even if I did, I would want to bring in an investigation team to see the history of the place and why these energies were manifested on not just me, but my significant other at the time. That would be my personal thing I would do both with. But if I had the opportunity to reverse the clock and change back time, I'd say I don't ever want to do that because of how frightening it is.
It's not good, and I know that it won't be popular to say, but I do not advise people going out looking for ghosts. You're going to bring stuff home with you, and they know that. I've seen them, and like I know, I think you've done investigations, right? Just to me, those are not ghosts; they're demons, and they will act like they are deceased humans, but it's just like messing with a Ouija board. I just would not do it. You're giving them license to come in. You're The more attention, and you know this probably, the more attention you give them, the worse it can get, right?
That's correct. Yes, that's very correct. Also, it applies a lot to the cryptid field as well when it comes to Squatch and Dogman.
Really? See, there's another hint. Oh, and have you ever had people that would have dogman encounters and they may be in some random place far away from their home and they'll have another one? Do you think dogmen would naturally just be able to find them when they wanted to? You know what I'm saying? It all lends itself to being supernatural in a lot of areas.
Well, that's an interesting question because, quite frankly, and I'll summarize it, I feel that the more someone who has an encounter, there is something about that individual that the dogman might be attracted to, such as possibly the way they are personally in their daily life or the fact of how they are. There have been cases where a dogman could just be intrigued by a human being and they'll have multiple encounters, or they'll watch them from the woods or something, like a stalker almost. I feel in cases like that, though, there is a bit of a deeper connection, because I had interviewed a woman who has had seen these things for years, even when she was just a child. And it's interesting because she actually had a physical confrontation with one where she was held by one. And to summarize it, it was one of those things where she feels that it has a lot to do with blood type. I don't know if you're familiar with that theory about blood types and certain blood types and whatnot.
Would that also include bloodlines?
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, demons and or fallen angels, they can read your thoughts. They know all about you, and they do follow you in your family history. They know your ancient ancestors. And isn't it interesting that in abductions, if you know the lore, I don't want to call it lore, but whatever, the stories behind that people say that the abductions happen generationally. Then on top of that, you're telling me that dogmen and maybe even Sasquatch have that same kind of thing going on about the blood. The blood is very um, important thing in the Bible. Also, you see where this all just. I need to make a list sometime and just correlate the similarities between fallen angels and demons and what aliens do. And it sounds like I could do some of the list with cryptids too. So what do you think about that?
I feel that's a great idea, because I feel that it definitely draws a line between why there are more encounters with people versus why they're just seen separately as a whole.
And it just makes me wonder, I forgot what dogman case this was, or even where I heard it from, but this one woman, she was seeing them at her house, but then she would be an hour or two away somewhere and also see them again. It might not have been the same dog man, but how are these dog men tracking this woman when she gets in a car and drives for 2 hours?
That also adds.
Believe that the dog man is running 80 miles an hour and able to not be seen and keep up with her on a 2 hour drive. You know what I mean? There's something, uh, extraordinary going on there.
It's interesting how you mention that, because I know that there are some people who. There was this one woman I had spoken to who had actually came from down in Arkansas, and she was telling me how she could be 30 miles from her house in a different township, different county, and whatnot, and there'd be a few of them just kind of, she get the impression, the vibes coming from, the hair would stand on the back of her neck and say, yeah, I'm being watched by one of these things, and that she'd see them out in like a courtyard somewhere or a bush and just watching them. And that makes me wonder.
That may be the one I'm thinking about because she saw them very often, and even with other people too. Right?
Exactly. I feel that because when I interviewed the individual who had the bloodline theory, I believe that there is this bloodline discussion, that there is more to it, to why they choose. Now, I will say this: I strongly don't believe that a dogman, with how hidden they are, will run, like you had mentioned, a square amount of miles to follow this woman. I feel that there's a bigger connection to it, and I feel it has something to do with her, that the other creatures are attracted to in the area. Because if there's a creature that's only about a mile away from where this person's at in their residence, where they're located at currently, that's not at home, and that there was one closer to her home, this other one is not too far from her, it wouldn't surprise me if there's something about her that it picks up on, well, telepathically or connected spiritually, which goes into the theory of them being supernatural, that they are linked to, that are intrigued by, whether it's what they wear or whether it's about them, their history that they may not know, but the dogmen do know. You know what I mean?
Well, the Lord. I'm not going to quote scripture here. I don't want to be too, it's not like that. But the Lord picked Noah and his family because he was pure in his generations. So there in the Bible, you have something, the bloodlines are important. Um, and so that's fascinating, and that's an actual. I never linked that with cryptos, but to me, that's a telltale sign that there's somehow definitely supernatural on the supernatural side. Those she's particularly dealing with are supernatural, almost certainly in my eyes. Was that the one that had something happen where they were in the woods with some friends and there was a fire or something? You know what I'm talking about? Like they saw a dog man or like almost a fire portal or something in the woods. You may not. I want to think that was the same lady, but I listened to so many encounters. It's insane.
Like you, I listen to so many encounters myself. I lost track of which one that is, but I feel it's one of the earlier episodes. I think it may have been either in before the 100 episodes or another 100 through 200. It's one of them because it sounds very like I've heard that before, but not recently.
It's just funny how I'm just picking up on these things. Like I have a totally different outlook. The Bible is like this the guide to the supernatural almost. Everything. It's the only thing that has made sense. It's like I have found the unified paranormal theory. And it wasn't until I started looking into the Bible, like I looked into cryptids and aliens and all that. You know what I'm saying? It's like my research, 30 years or however long I've been doing that, that's finally what it all led to. And it's the only thing that fits all the pieces of the puzzle together to make any kind of sense at all.
I agree with that because personally I've felt the same way myself. Um, before we go into any further discussion, real quick, when it comes to cryptids, when it comes to paranormal, when it comes to aliens, do you feel that there is a missing link between all three of those topics and that there is a strong connection that is built bigger than what we expect? Or do you feel that they're three separate things on their own end?
It seems to me they're all linked by either fallen angels or the Nephilim or genetic offspring or it really to me there's just kind of one source of all that. It's a spiritual battle down here. There's a war in heaven and a third of the angels fell down, and some of them that actually mated with the women got locked up until the end times in the abyss, and a lot of them are roaming around, and all pretty much all the demons are still roaming around, which are the Nephilim's spirits. When they finally died, they didn't have anywhere to go. So to me, they're all linked. The cryptids is a little bit, like I said, there's still some dogman encounters and stuff that just don't sound like fallen angels, but those could be the offspring. They could be flesh and body descendants of fallen angels, which gives them they could have to survive just like the giants did back then. There's so many stories of the people couldn't even feed them anymore. They had to eat so much. So I mean, I really do think that you could have. It's almost like being a half breed. You know how who are some mythical feature? Hercules. He was son of Zeus. He was human, but he had, since he was half human and half god, he had some powers there that normal humans didn't. And so I almost think some of these cryptids, it's related to it for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I strongly agree with that as well. And it's possible because there's a bit of a big link, chain links to it. Um, with that being said, Abnormal, we're going to be actually heading close to the end of the show right now. I want to give this time to you to promote anything you're doing, what your content is, and where people can reach you.
All right, well, if you look at my channel, the bulk of it was Mandela Effects videos. I probably will not be doing many Mandela Effect videos. It'd have to be a huge Mandela Effect for me to do that again. I don't want to just regurgitate Mandela Effects. Um, I didn't start the channel out as a Mandela Effect channel. And I no longer feel the need to really make Mandela Effect videos. I was kind of early on in that. There was only a handful of channels that were doing videos about the Mandela Effect when I started doing that, and now there's a lot of them, and I think a lot of it's kind of been blown at people. It's almost like people are grasping for straws trying to find new Mandela Effects. I still have Mandela effects that until I die, I'll say that used to be different. So it's not that I just don't see the need to research it anymore because I don't think we're ever going to get any answers. The it's maybe time travel is like one of the best guesses I can come up with there. Um, and maybe some butterfly effect kind of happening there that changed little things for some people. There's no telling. I don't think we're going to get any answers. And it's like trying to study UFOs, just the UFOs. We've been looking at that for 50 years and they still don't know anything. Why? You're just looking at their vehicles. You know what I mean? So that's why I don't study UFOs anymore. You can only learn so much about somebody by the vehicle they travel in. You know what I mean? So I think I don't have a website or anything. I don't really have much going on, but I do want to interview people. I would love to have some eyewitnesses to whatever cryptids, uh, uh, anything, any kind of paranormal thing, experiences people have. And I'd also like to interview more content creators and researchers of any kind of strange, abnormal subjects. So you can email me at theabnormaltruth@gmail.com if you would like to write me and tell me what you got going on. I would love to start doing interviews every once in a while, and that's really all I have going on. YouTube is restricting a lot of our channels and stuff, and I would like to get some interviews out before we don't have that ability anymore.
I strongly agree with that, and of course, I would like to thank you, Abnormal, for doing the show. I'm a very big fan of your work. I know we didn't really talk about the Mandela Effect, but I would love to have you back on for a future show discussing that topic, as well as a little bit more of the UFO alien theory discussion as well. I really like what you're putting out there. It's very nice, and I really think it's a very intelligent stuff. And I feel that a lot of people who aren't really familiar with that should get into it. And I really praise your work. I mean, you have delivered great content. And I'm a big fan.
Well, I'm a fan of yours too. I think I've watched all of Vic's videos, and I'm starting on your channel now. And I've probably watched 20 of your videos so far, or something. And so that's when I was in one of your live streaming shows, and you said, "Hey, I want to interview you." I was thinking the same thing, so I was like, "Yeah, we got to do that. That was just meant to be." So I had fun doing it, and also, if people don't know, I have interviewed you on my channel, so everybody should watch both of them, support both of our channels just to help get it all out there. And I really appreciate you taking the time this morning with me.
Oh, it was a pleasure, Abnormal. It very much so was. And for everybody out there who comments on the video, guys, of course, like you said, I have links I'll be leaving for you to get in contact with Abnormal. And guys, check out his channel. He has very good content. I trust me when I say it. If you're looking for something that's going to mind blow you and intrigue you, take a look at what Abnormal's got cooking on his YouTube because it's pretty good stuff. With that being said, though, Abnormal, I want to thank you again for coming on the show, and I want to wish you again thanks for the fantastic morning. We've been conversating for nearly almost 4 hours now, and I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your schedule to do my show, and of course, as always, it was a pleasure to go on your show and have a great time doing that as well.
I had fun, and anytime you want to do it again, just let me know.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Abnormal, of course, you have a fantastic evening, and you take care of yourself, my friend.
Good night.
There's mysterious phenomenon throughout the world. The world's turning, and the creatures of the night are roaming. You're listening to The Venomous Fringe. Let's dive into the X.